Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're actually opening the file on what I like to call a true theological cold case. Because, when you read the biblical texts, they are incredibly clear on what demons do and how they act, but they're surprisingly silent on their exact origin. Where do they actually come from? It's kind of like jumping into a movie in the second act, right? You know exactly who the bad guys are, but you somehow completely missed the prologue. It's this fascinating mystery that has literally puzzled scholars for centuries. So let's crack open the source material and investigate. Okay, let's dive into this. To solve the mystery, we're going to lay out our evidence board and move through 5 key areas. First up, the biblical origin mystery. Second, are they fallen angels? Third, we'll look at the Nephilim spirits theory. Fourth, alternative and modern views. And finally, number 5, the final verdict. Starting right off with Section 1, the biblical origin mystery, and what the Bible does and doesn't say. So the core question driving our entire investigation today is beautifully simple. Where did demons come from? Now, if you're familiar with the biblical narrative at all, you know the text is highly specific about their character. They're depicted constantly throughout the scriptures, just causing total chaos. But their precise origin story, it's left as a total mystery. It turns out the Bible isn't exactly a Wikipedia page with a neatly organized origin section for every single creature it mentions. And when we compare the facts, the gap in the record becomes super obvious. Stated clearly, the Bible absolutely portrays demons as real, personal, evil spirits that are entirely opposed to God and completely subject to Christ's authority. But on the flip side, what is not explicitly stated is their precise origin. And because there's this massive gap in the historical record, it forces us to act like theological detectives. We have to piece together clues from across centuries of literature just to try and fill in the blanks. Which brings us to Section 2. Are they fallen angels? The historically dominant view. To build this specific case, theologians actually had to connect 3 major dots hidden across the texts. First, Jesus directly references the devil and his angels. Second, there are widespread descriptions across the texts of Satan possessing a highly organized kingdom, which strongly suggests he has lieutenants and servants operating under his command. And third, you have the Apostle Paul, who frequently uses language describing hostile spiritual rulers, authorities, and powers. And this brilliantly illustrates how the dominant theological view doesn't just rely on one single verse. Instead, it's a really powerful canonical synthesis of these 3 biblical concepts working seamlessly together. But here's the crucial point. Despite the fallen angel model being the most common and historically dominant view, the exact sentence, demons are fallen angels, is not stated word for word anywhere in the biblical text. Crazy, right? It's actually a deduction. It's a synthesized theological model, drawn very carefully from the clues left behind. So we're dealing with an inference here, albeit a really, really strong one. Which leads us directly to our next major suspect in Section 3, the Nephilim spirits theory. This is the extra-biblical Jewish tradition. Now, this is easily the most visually striking and specialized theory we're looking at today. It's heavily influenced by strands of Second Temple Judaism and texts outside the standard canon, particularly 1 Enoch. Let's actually walk through this weird, strange lineage step by step. Step 1. In this understanding, the mysterious sons of God unite with human women. Step 2. From this union, terrifying giant offspring, known as the Nephilim, are born. Step 3. These giants eventually die, either in the flood or in battle. And Step 4. Their disembodied spirits, now trapped, become wandering evil spirits that desperately seek bodies to inhabit. And what's truly fascinating about this theory is how its supporters actually connect it back to the Gospels. They specifically point to Jesus describing an unclean spirit roaming through waterless places, desperately seeking rest. Yes, I know, this theory sounds like a massive fantasy epic, but there is a major canonical catch. Genesis 6 definitely names the Nephilim for sure, but it does not say their spirits became demons. The crucial identification connecting the spirits of these dead giants to the demons of the New Testament, that comes directly from extra-biblical Jewish literature, not an explicit statement in the biblical canon itself. So it's an incredibly compelling historical tradition, but it just lacks that essential primary textual backing. Okay, let's shift gears to Section 4, alternative and modern views. We're going to cover other suspects and modern interpretations. Let's rapid fire through a few other suspects and see how they hold up against biblical pushback. First up, the separate class theory. This one argues demons are an entirely different species from fallen angels or Nephilim, but the pushback is pretty significant. 2 Peter and Jude describe certain sinning angels as being kept in chains for judgment, whereas gospel demons are actively roaming the earth. The texts just don't expressly establish a separate origin species. Second, some traditions suggest they're actually dead, wicked humans. The pushback here is quite clear. This isn't a modern ghost movie. The Bible treats the dead and demons as entirely separate categories. Finally, the modern metaphor theory. This views demons merely as symbolic language for mental illness or societal evil. The biblical pushback? Well, it simply doesn't account for the gospel narratives. In the texts, demons recognize Jesus, they speak, they show fear of coming judgment, and in the famous Gerasene episode, they even request to enter a herd of pigs. A simple medical label for illness doesn't easily account for those highly specific conscious narrative actions. Oh, and there's also the hostile powers view. This model heavily links demons to idolatry, false worship, and territorial powers. Kind of like Paul warning that pagan sacrifices involve participation with demons. But when you really analyze this view, you realize it's more about what demons do rather than what they are. And because of that, it can easily fit right inside the traditional fallen angel model without contradicting it at all. And that brings us to our final section, Section 5, the final verdict. What the canonical consensus actually is. Looking at the biblical consensus, whatever position one takes concerning their exact origin, 4 clear traits consistently emerge. Number 1, they are personal spiritual agents. We're not talking about impersonal, free-floating forces of evil here. Number 2, they actively know and oppose God. Number 3, they promote deception and idolatry. And number 4, they are mere creatures. Yes, they form part of Satan's kingdom, but they are absolutely not rival deities to God. Why does this matter so much? Because by defining them as mere creatures, it completely rejects the idea of a dualistic universe where good and evil are equal, rival forces fighting for ultimate control. The text completely resists purely psychological or metaphorical readings. These are active, subordinate agents. So when we synthesize all of these narratives, all of those dramatic encounters in the New Testament, we arrive at an ultimate bottom line regarding their status in the text. It brings us to this incredibly powerful summarizing thought. Christ commands them successfully, and their final judgment is certain. This just totally highlights the absolute, unquestioned authority of Christ over these entities in the biblical narrative. It shows us that no matter their murky, heavily debated origins, they are ultimately just created beings destined for judgment. So, here is our final verdict on this theological cold case. Identifying demons as fallen angels, that is the best supported canonical synthesis. It draws on the most textual evidence to create a cohesive, logical picture. Identifying them specifically as the spirits of dead Nephilim, on the other hand, while that may be deeply historically illuminating, especially for understanding the fascinating context of Second Temple Jewish thought, but it clearly exceeds what the biblical canon explicitly states. Which leaves us with this final question to ponder. How does understanding the origins of these ancient beliefs change our view of the spiritual realm and the concept of evil today? When we see exactly how carefully these theological syntheses were built over centuries, it really forces us to ask how deeply ancient texts continue to shape our modern understanding of the world. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. It's been great acting as lead detective with you all. Keep asking those big questions.